I have played hundreds of vehicles in World of Tanks console. I've also played hundreds of days, thousands of hours on the game, and today's video is going to be about one of the most overpowered vehicles that Wargaming have ever created within World of Tanks. And there's a few reasons for it. We're going to delve into my highest damage game that I've ever had in the game and why that was. And of course, we're looking at one of the most overpowered vehicles that Wargaming have unquestionably have ever released, the Object 477A, but more importantly, why I think that these sorts of vehicles have completely destroyed the whole actual experience of a lot of players, especially regarding Era 3, because we played this vehicle during when I was just trying to earn a bit of silver. We had already gone all the way back down to zero basically on silver from streaming and stuff like that, and so I decided when I was feeling really rough for the last couple of days to actually jump in and just play very casually one of these vehicles. And during that casual experience of playing this, because not only does this vehicle in particular get one of the highest silver earn rates of all vehicles in Cold War, it gets 65% extra silver every single game on top of your base value of silver, so it is a premium of course. It's the fact that this tank is a premium and it is at the highest tier, and not only that, this is a tank destroyer, and these are one of the many reasons why I think vehicles like this can be really detrimental to the game's overall performance, and why a lot of people find it very difficult to get into Cold War, which is one of the modes that Wargaming are really anticipating to be a new experience for a lot of players, and that the end goal experience of this game mode just feels like they've kind of ruined it with a lot of these premium vehicles. And not just the 477A, this video isn't just purely about this vehicle in particular, but more about the whole experience. And I'm really interested to see whether you guys share that kind of experience, because the whole point of this 477A is that it is essentially a vehicle that is a tank destroyer that has better armor than almost every single one of the heavies in the game, and from the front this thing is nigh impenetrable with basically no weak points. The only real weak point is this kind of little hatch on the front of the vehicle which you can pen, but bearing in mind that a lot of the engagements are kind of from across the map, and even when you are up close and personal with one of these things, as I found out when I was playing up against one, that it becomes a case of neither one of you can pen the other, even if you know the weak point. And that is because it not only gets a weak point, but it's covered in spaced armor because of these little kind of spots on in front of it that are a pain in the backside to actually hit. So a tank that is nigh invulnerable and a premium covered in spaced everywhere to stop any heat rounds that you might be firing, even with a 900 penetration main armament, this tank can't really be penned, and it only becomes pennable through the sides of the tracks where the spaced armor isn't, and of course if you catch the broadside of this vehicle or the rear, which is the case for almost every tank in the game, but frontally this thing is almost impenetrable. So with that being said, not only does this tank get a fantastic frontal set of armor as a tank destroyer, which is primarily how this tank is I guess supposed to be played as a tank destroyer, but it gets 760 alpha damage, and not only that, when you are in between your reloads you get a little autocannon that, albeit doesn't have the best penetration, but if you're willing to spend a load of gold on getting increased penetration, can be very deadly itself. We didn't run it with any premium APCR, but of course you can do if you want to, and so it gets increased penetration and has the same amount of damage with increased shell velocity, so is better in every way, which, yeah, I just didn't want to spend, 400 silver every single time because we're trying to earn silver with the tank. But if you were trying to be the most competitive, then yeah, I would 100% be firing the premium kind of minigun ammo. But the main gun, 750 or 760 alpha damage, is very, very powerful. It also gets a ridiculous damage per minute of 5,100 for a tank that really can't be penned from the front. And not only that, it gets the ability to go 82.5 kilometers an hour with a power to weight ratio of 24.56, which, yeah, that isn't very balanced. And so it gets really good armor, it's super fast, it has a brilliant DPM, its hit points are up there with some of the best in the mode, its power to weight ratio is also up there with some of the best in the game, and similar to what you would see with light tanks in the game at the same era. And it gets good accuracy. Its reload is almost 9 seconds, just slightly under, allowing you to be very, very competitive in this sort of mode. And of course, with enhanced rations, you can boost everything up when you activate it as like an additional bonus to the passive bonus that you get with enhanced rations, increasing reload, view range, blah, blah, blah. Now, obviously, this tank doesn't get the best camo in the game. However, when you're playing it in the way that it's not supposed to be played, but how it is actually supposed to be played, if that makes sense, because it's not supposed to snipe from the back. It's supposed to be, well, it is supposed to snipe from the back, given that it's a tank destroyer, but in reality, you want to be up close and personal, so you can be more accurate and use the armor effectively. This thing becomes an absolute nightmare to try and deal with. And yeah, this is the sort of thing that Wargaming should really be trying to avoid entirely, because not only do you have to purchase it, but the fact that it is so outrageously good that it ruins the experience of anyone trying to play any of the top tier tanks within Era 3. And lots of people talk about the introduction of the Weasel TOW, which is the missile launching light tank that's super fast, super small, and deals a ton of damage in one go. But I think that this is probably more of an issue than the Weasel as a controversial topic, because of the fact that when a player plays in this, there is a lot more opportunity that you can be super consistent throughout your entire playthrough of all of the games, because you have a super high damage gun, because you have that armor. And when you're an experienced player of the game, which, I mean, when I've played hundreds of days into this game, I think I can safely put myself in that position, it becomes ridiculous. And let's jump into a gameplay whilst we continue our talks about this sort of tank and how Wargaming can try and avoid this stuff in the future, because it's super important. And although it might not be on the game mode that all of you watch, I really want to highlight it to you, because it happens to a degree in a lot of the vehicles, whether you play World War II or Cold War, and the kind of problem that it's been creating, especially with regards to just the premium is being a lot better than some of the tech tree tanks, as it's commonly become known as power creep, whatever you want to call it, over time, generating some of the more overpowered and competitive tanks in the game that are locked behind a paywall, which obviously a lot of people screaming pay to win, and this tank is definitely, in all regards, a pay to win tank. And although I don't believe that the game is a pay-to-win game, because give any monkey a vehicle that's overpowered and eventually they'll have a good game, but they'll still be, you know, able to be taken out, etc. quite easily by someone who is more experienced over time. Whereas this, actually, if someone is actually a new player, will probably still struggle as an experienced player trying to take it out if it's a one-on-one engagement, because it is just that strong. And so, yeah, this one is 100% pay to win. And I think that that is a key problem. There should never be this distinction between being super overpowered and, yeah, as good and overpowered as this one. So let's jump into this gameplay and see exactly why I thought that this tank is crazy, and I really underestimated just how broken this thing can be in the games. Now then, so we have to give some backstory. This game that we are seeing here on Berlin, this was in fact a game which I was playing late in the evening. I was just basically chilling very casually. I'm not trying to sweat super hard. I'm playing a tank that is basically allowing me to not have to think a whole lot because of the armor and because of the alpha. And so the whole goal was just to try and earn some silver. And what I found during this time was actually pretty disgusting. And I think I can call it disgusting. I don't want to be throwing around this term as to, you know, it's disgusting, blah, 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 you know, every tank is disgusting, etc, etc. But this one, I think is truly horrible, like, because of the fact that we're playing up against some tanks that are obviously trying to fight it out on the heavy tank corner. We have quite a few vehicles that are just going to try and deal with us. We've got an M1A1 who's decided to come towards us, try and take us out of the game. Now, obviously, doesn't look like the most experienced player in the game, obviously coming in, and so I've got 3 tanks ahead of me. There's no one on my team. There's no one around me, right? I'm in a tank, I'm thinking, oh, okay, we've got lots of tank, let's start backing it up and we'll just start dealing damage. The whole point in me backing it up is so that we can essentially keep our frontal armor. We want to avoid any of them coming around the side of us where they can actually start dealing damage. Remember, there's 3 tanks ahead of us and we've taken about 1 shot of damage. We've dealt 4.7 thousand damage back to them. And all we've done is basically go forward and reverse. There's no complex game mechanics behind what we're doing here. It is your typical corner fighting mentality. And you can see that they are just struggling to do anything against me. And we're up to 6,000 damage already. This is Era 3, so I don't think we can really complain all too much with this being the best result by far. But what you see here is we found ourselves a little BMP3. I'm just trying to deal a little bit of extra damage in between our normal shells, and of course we can swap back to the little minigun. We set him on fire. He's struggling very hard here, and there you go, he's still alive. He's taken out one of our teammates, but now our team are starting to move up with me. We're just getting a few vehicles that you can see outlined in the smoke. There's one literally right ahead of me that I can't quite see, but he's going to take another 750. The BMPs just bounced off of us because, you know, of course our frontal spaced armor stops any of the missiles from easily being able to pen us. They still can, but it isn't, you know, as easy to actually pen us. So with a 9,300 damage down, I've had a good result. I don't think there's a whole lot more damage we're going to see within this game. We actually have the ability now to swap back to the minigun. Obviously, you can see the best position to be with a minigun if you're going to auto-aim is directly behind him. We just keep swapping back between the minigun and our actual gun when we think we can pen him. You can see we're just following him around. He's struggling. There's nothing he can do. Like, I genuinely feel sorry for him because not only the fact is that in order to actually deal with the 477A Malo, you want to be either, you know, looking down from above it, which is a mistake I made there. We actually put our hull armor up, well, the back of the tank up, which allowed him to get an angle down onto the top of the upper plate, which is the only reason he penned us. But either way, we've done 12,719 damage in this game. We picked up 3 enemies. We fought off 3 tanks all at once and survived with only taking 500 damage at that point in time. And of course, now we go after the M1, which is a tech tree vehicle to my knowledge, and of course is one of the starter vehicles that you can get in Era 3. And here you go with the little minigun, swapping back to the normal gun, and then it's essentially just getting hold down, whereby he genuinely, there's nothing he can do. I don't think that there should be a vehicle in the game where whether you're hold down or whether you're not, that there's basically nothing that they can do to us. And so you can see we're just loading between the rounds. Bad shell by me, so obviously late in the evening you don't want to be focusing super hard, but at this point we've done 15.4 thousand damage. Yeah, 15.4 thousand damage by someone who barely plays Cold War and who has been essentially, you know, just playing quite casually in the game late at night, and primarily just for silver. We're not even playing it in the most competitive way, and you can see here another BMP using that little minigun, swapping back to the primary now, and we can go after the rest of the vehicles in this game. So with 4 enemies taken out, 16,346 damage, you kind of understand why I find these sorts of tanks severely horrible for the experience of most players in the game. Because as soon as an experienced player gets in a tank like this, it is horrible. It is horrible. Even the Weasel Toe is running in fear against us because he knows that even the frontal armor, if he hits us with a missile, he's probably still not going to be able to do anything against us. And we don't actually chase him down in this one. There's no point in me chasing down a Weasel for like 100 damage. We might as well go for the MA AGS, who we launch our little missiles against. We can pen him with our missiles. We ram him because we're super heavy. We can keep firing these missiles. We can swap back to the standard, and we're up to 19,335 damage. Yeah, in probably one of the easiest ways you could ever get 19,000 damage in the game. And albeit this is probably the equivalent to getting like 10,000 damage in World of Tanks console's World War II game mode, the thing with it is that, yeah, we dealt 3 times the damage of basically the rest of our team, just slightly under that, probably more like 2.75 times, of course, the Leopard 2A4, but still, A player that barely plays the game mode, getting 2.75 times the highest damage on our team, picking up 732,000 silver in a tank that really doesn't feel balanced at all. And that is my problem with the introduction of these vehicles, is that not only do they play ridiculously OP, but they can hold off an entire flank. There is no tank in the game that I think can hold off 3 vehicles at the same time, picking up over the full health of their own vehicle against the opponents whilst taking 1 shell in return at the very start of that engagement. I don't think there is any tank in the game that could ever really do that very easily. I'm sure things like the Maus could do that, but at the same time the Maus is very slow. There is a lot of weaknesses with vehicles like that. This one doesn't seem to get any of those weaknesses. There is not one thing about this tank that I feel is a superior weakness against a lot of the other tanks. You could say the view range, but at the end of the day the view range is fine. It gets 600 plus meters of view range, which is most of the time enough in Cold War, but of course is mitigated that view range anyway because of the fact that a lot of the times you're very close to the opponents in the playstyle that this one has, because of the armor, because the armor is overpowered. And so you get all of these things added together, really just create this sense that a tank like this just shouldn't really be in the game at all. And although I say this, Wargaming will probably come out with tanks that are similar in power level, and they have. They've introduced vehicles that are very, very strong, and unfortunately in Cold War I think the experience of balancing tanks just hasn't been there, and that's the real problem that first arose when they started introducing premium tanks like this. And it's the same for World War II premiums. I don't want to be, you know, saying that it's only Cold War tanks that are overpowered. Some of the premium vehicles that they've introduced as World War II vehicles have been horrifically annoying to play against, whether they're annoying, whether they're overpowered, whether they're a combination of both. You've seen the introduction of the broken AVRE, not the most competitive tank by any means, but one of the most annoying to fight against. The mechanic where you can use HE, which essentially deals damage regardless of what tank you're fighting. Whether it's a heavy tank hold down, you can do 400 damage to it. And of course with the armor model that the AVRE gets, with a lot of spaced armor on the front and very minimal weak points that require RNG to actually work in your favour, or accuracy to work exactly in your favour, then even then you can still miss them. And so with that being said, these introduction of the tanks really do hinder the game mode, and although you see a lot of the vehicles come out like this, they usually have some weak points. And it used to be back in the day that premium tanks used to have one good feature or a couple of good features that allowed them to play well. You look at things like the CDC, it was one of the most hyped vehicles that World of Tanks console had at the time because it was cool, it was, you know, very fast, it had a good gun to a degree, although the dispersion was horrible, and so you felt like it was a trade-off. It might have suited your playstyle, and so you go ahead and buy it. Whereas now it's a case of these premium vehicles suit anyone's playstyle because you can play it however you want. And that is the real problem, is that the development over time has decided that it's okay to release these premium tanks that may only have 1 or 2 weak points or whatever, or 1 or 2 weaknesses. And with that is created this kind of breed of premium tanks being better than tech tree counterparts, which you might think that a lot of people are going to go out and actually buy premium vehicles like this that are overpowered in order to do well and to perform well in games. But actually I feel like these sorts of tanks are probably less fun to play than when you play some of the more nuanced vehicles that you feel have been crafted to suit a certain playstyle. Tanks like this will often actually lead you into just feeling like you haven't particularly done that well. I mean, in the previous game I didn't do anything that we particularly, you know, could demonstrate that it was me playing the tank that rewarded me. It was a case of the scenario came up where we weren't actually kind of outflanked by a ton of vehicles. It was enough to be able to deal with, and all I did was reverse. And even in then we missed quite a few shells that we could have got extra damage, we could have broken the 20,000 barrier, and there really wouldn't have been that much to say about it. I don't think that I felt particularly happy or rewarded that we'd done so much damage, other than the fact that it was my highest damage game ever. I guess. And so with that, that's my problem. It doesn't feel rewarding, at least to me as a player, and I'm sure a lot of you who feel the same way. And I'd be interested in, even if you don't, what your opinion is on all of these sorts of vehicles, because the more overpowered a tank is from my perspective, the less fun I have in it, because you just attribute your success in the tank to it being an overpowered tank, which to all intents and purposes probably is the reason that we did 19,000 damage. You don't see 19,000 damage in the M1A2 Abrams very often, which, you know, it's just one of those things that I feel like it doesn't even benefit the person driving it. It's not particularly that fun. Yeah, you can have these crazy results. Yeah, you can increase your damage, but it doesn't feel like it was that rewarding to really play. And so the whole argument with, well, wargaming have to make money somehow, and in fact I don't think that it is necessarily needed to actually make money. People will still buy premium tanks that aren't as good, provided that the next premium tank that comes out doesn't have everything that the, you know, one that had, you know, the less statistics or not as good, on top of having all of the other things, because now it becomes that these tanks are basically available to anyone to use to play in any way that they want, and regardless of the class system that is in the game, completely obliterate that and just go by their own ways. So yeah, it frustrates me. I would love to see wargaming just take a stance on that these sorts of tanks just don't get created again, because the more and more they put in, the more the kind of option of buying a tank that isn't as competitive just goes away, and then people don't buy the tanks, because at the end of the day, I don't think I've bought a tank on this game in a long time, because of the season passes and stuff like that. We're able to get gold, and I just save it up for a couple of tanks that I might like within the game. We get to test out some of the vehicles, and often I find these sorts of vehicles very boring, and that is exactly why. We picked this one out of a Celebration war chest, which is why we're playing it, and I didn't realise that it made so much silver. It's not even like they made it not get that much silver. They gave that as well. And I'm sure it sold very well, but have all of the other premiums that have come out sold as well as this one? No, probably not, and it would be better that they just introduced vehicles that were good at doing a couple things rather than all of them. And that's the key point of today's video, because there is not hype around these vehicles. I do not get hyped. I feel annoyed that these sorts of tanks come out. It used to be back in the day that you get excited that there's a brand new tank that has something different to feature. And now when there is a tank that's super overpowered at being able to do everything, everyone gets angry. Getting angry at the premium tank that's just come out. Should it be the case? Probably not. You don't want to see everyone getting angry at the tank that you've just released. Surely they should be getting excited to try and play it and give it a go. And that sort of thing doesn't really happen. You see it with the AVRE, with Weasel, and guess what? It's all of these overpowered, broken vehicles that have this kind of thing that come out alongside it. So yeah, that's kind of my rant. I wanted to talk about it. It's something that is important, and to give my opinion on it. No, I haven't kind of avoided the topic at all. We just wanted to really kind of showcase why I think these tanks are a bad thing for the game, and why I think wargaming shouldn't do these anytime soon ever again. And in fact, if it was down to me, they would never sell these tanks again. I think that it would be good if they just completely avoided selling any of these overpowered tanks. The Weasel, this tank, yes, you might make a small buck wargaming from releasing them again and again, but at the same time you're also ruining the matchmaker for everyone else, and the more and more that they do this in time is going to end up ruining the whole experience anyway. So from me to wargaming, please just remove these entirely from the sales at all, and I think that they would be much better off in the long run than introducing tanks like this and keep on selling them. So that's my stance. Obviously, you're entitled to your own opinion. Maybe you love rolling around in the Weasel 101 and think it was the best thing ever created. Maybe you love being overpowered like the 477A and feeling like you have the blatant advantage over a lot of the tech tree vehicles of anyone else that's playing. But sometimes you have to think about what the enemy team experience are in the games, and certainly in that first game that I showcased today, the enemy team have nothing that they could do, and it did not feel fun for me, and I'm sure as hell it did not feel fun for them, not being able to pen me at all, and basically being just worse in almost every way. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like it if you did. Let me know what your thoughts are, because it's super important we kind of give these out, and I'm interested to see what you think. But other than that, I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day, and I hope you join me back in the next video coming soon. Goodbye.